I'm Corey Rogie with GI Sports, and I'm here to show you the Tippmann TMC. It's a mag-fed and hopper-fed gun. Pretty cool gun if you ask me. We'll go ahead, kind of give you a look at the box here. We're going to do a quick unboxing. So here we have our owner's manual. We have our mag feed only magazines. Okay, you get 2 of them. We have our dummy magazine. If you just decide, hey, I don't want to run mag fed, I want to run with a hopper, you're going to need this dummy magazine. We have our handguard and our barrel. Our accessory pack comes with your barrel blocking device, pull through cleaning cable. You have your traditional feed elbow for traditional hopper play. And then you have your mag-fed blanking plate. This is to be used only when you're running the mag feed. Here's your Tippmann TMC right out of the box. So we have our marker here. We're gonna go ahead and show you how to assemble it, both hopper feed and magazine feed. So we'll start off with the mag fed. All right, we'll start with our blanking plate. Go ahead and unthread our thumb screw here. And what you're going to do is you're just going to lay the blanking plate onto the receiver, okay? You just want to lay it on there. You don't want to force the bottom of it into that groove or anything like that. It literally just rests right onto the receiver, okay? And then from there, your thumb screw, you're going to go ahead and attach that. And just hand tight is sufficient. Doesn't have to be wrenched down super tight or anything like that. Okay. And then from there, we're going to install our handguard and our barrel. But before we install the handguard and barrel, we're going to have to remove 1 screw on the receiver side. Okay. We're going to have to remove this 1/8 Allen screw. We're going to start with our 1/8 Allen wrench. Go ahead and loosen it up. And we'll tip it over, give it a shake. Bolt comes out. Now I like to install the handguard first. So I'm going to go ahead and slide that over the barrel and barrel adapter. We're going to go ahead and put our screw back into place here. And tighten it back down. Got to grab the right Allen wrench here. Go ahead and install your barrel. All right. Now that we have our barrel installed, we can use our mag feed only magazines, okay? The one cool thing about this magazine is, you know, most your traditional mag-fed magazines, you have to shove paintballs in through the top. One thing that's nice and convenient about this style magazine is it actually has a winding feature, okay? So you just turn this wheel until it comes to a stop. So it's come to a stop. Once you feel it stop or there's any kind of pressure, don't turn it anymore, it's done. You go ahead and load your paintballs at that point, okay? And once you have your paintballs loaded up, you can insert the magazine into the marker. There's actually an actuator on the top of the magazine. Once it is inserted all the way into the marker, it will then relieve that spring tension and allow the paintballs to be fed into the marker, okay? So we can go ahead and do that, and you might even hear that spring. Kind of heard that? And that's the spring pressure releasing and pushing those paintballs up to the top. We'll remove that, set it off to the side here, and I'll show you how to convert it over to hopper feed. So just like before, we're going to loosen up our thumb screw. We're going to take the blank plate off the side of the receiver. Go ahead and reattach that just so you don't lose it. Okay. Set that off to the side. Now from there, this is a pretty critical part of switching over from your magazine feed to hopper feed. You want to insert the magazine first. Okay? Once you have the magazine inserted first, then you can add the elbow. If you're to do it the other way around, you run the risk of the magazine not seating fully, and then you run into problems with paint breakage. So now that we have that magazine, the dummy magazine, inserted all the way, we're going to go ahead and install our elbow. And you want to make sure that it actually clips into the receiver. It's kind of hard to see here, but I'll kind of demonstrate that for you. And then from there, we're going to put our thumb screw back on. And now you're all set for just a traditional hopper feed. I'll go over some of the features of the marker. Obviously, the TMC, you can run it in a traditional hopper feed configuration, or you can run it with magazine. So magazine fed. Now these are traditional paintball magazines only. You won't be able to run anything like First Strike or anything like that. You have a collapsible sliding stock here. You have a thumb style selector switch for your safety, and semi-automatic only, obviously. You have a top cocking handle, charging handle, whatever you like to call it. Safety switch. And then for magazine feed, you have your magazine release button on the right-hand side of the marker. Okay. Now, what we'll do is we'll go ahead, we'll tear into this gun, and I'll kind of show you all the parts and pieces, how to disassemble it, how to reassemble it, so on and so forth. So we're going to start by removing our feed elbow. Just go ahead and loosen up that thumb screw here. Go ahead and remove the elbow. Make sure you put this back on there, just, you know, so you don't lose it or misplace it. Go ahead and set that off to the side. Go ahead and remove your magazine. Go ahead and remove our barrel here. Grab our Allen wrench and remove our screw that holds the foregrip into place. Go ahead and give it a little shake. That screw will come out. Remove our hand guard, set that off into a safe place. And then from there, I'm going to also remove the rear sight. Now that rear sight, it'll just slide completely off the rail. Go ahead and reinsert your screw, set it off to the side. Okay, just like on some of our other markers, like the Cronus, for example, there's a Phillips head screw on the right-hand side of the grip. We're going to go ahead, we're going to remove that. Just go ahead and set that screw off to the side. And then from there, all the rest of your receiver screws are going to be on the left-hand side of the marker. Now, I like to use drill for this process. You can use a drill. You just want to be extra careful when removing them and putting them back into place. That way you don't strip them. So we'll go ahead, start to remove some of these screws. Okay, so here's where we're going to have to be a little careful when taking the TMC apart. It's a little bit different than most of your other paintball markers that are clamshell design. And it's mainly because of the way that we have the trigger system set up and also how we have the selector switch set up. Okay, I typically like to start by removing the rubber grips first. We'll go ahead, we'll put those back together and just kind of set them off to the side here. From there, you have your internal gas line system and your tank adapter. We'll go ahead and remove the ASA, the tank adapter, and we'll set that off to the side. Okay. Here comes the tricky part. There's two things that have to happen kind of simultaneously when taking the receiver apart. One, you're going to kind of pull the charging handle back just slightly. And then 2, you're going to flip the selector switch to the fire, okay? You're going to pull the trigger and you should feel that bolt system go forward. Once the bolt system goes forward, you can pull the trigger just slightly and you're going to pull up on the clamshell. And you may also have to kind of pull back on the charging handle a little bit, and then everything should come right off, okay? Like always, I like to leave the receiver screws in the receiver. That way they don't get mixed up, they don't get lost. Your safety is going to be contained by a C-clip that's on the underside of the receiver, okay? So you don't have to worry about that. Same thing with the magazine catch. There's a button and it's retained, so you don't have to worry about losing that, all right? So go ahead and set that off to the side. From there, we're going to kind of show you the internals. It's very similar to the Cronus, actually. You have your trigger linkage, secondary trigger, your sear, your front bolt, the power tube and valve assembly. You have your rear bolt, that silver bar in the top there, that's your linkage arm. And then one thing that's a little bit different on this gun is you have a top cocking handle or charging handle, okay? So very reminiscent of the Cronus. So now we'll go ahead, we'll take it apart, kind of show you what else is inside and how to take it apart, and also how to properly put it back together, because this is one marker that's a little bit more difficult to put back together. So we're going to go ahead and remove our charging handle first. I'm going to set that off to the side. From there, we're going to go ahead and pull our linkage arm. And I do want to show you something that's a little bit different about this linkage arm. This linkage arm has this plastic piece on top, and it is, believe it or not, directional. And this actually interacts with your charging handle, okay? If you get it inserted backwards, you put the linkage arm in backwards, your marker will not function correctly. So you do want to make sure that it is inserted correctly. And we'll go over that when I go to put it back together, okay? You have your front bolt. You have your trigger linkage. Go ahead and get that out of here. Set that off to the side. You have your main trigger. And some of these parts, because they're new, they're going to be a little bit harder to, you know, the gun's new, it's going to be a little bit harder to pull apart. You got your gas line, your internal gas line. And the trigger, you can't just pull it straight out, okay? Because the gas line actually comes into contact with that. The gas line sits over top of the trigger, so it's hard to just pull that trigger right out, all right? So keep that in mind. You go ahead and pull our trigger and our trigger pin out, okay? We'll go ahead and remove our secondary trigger, secondary trigger pin. There's another one. From there, the valve assembly comes out of this marker pretty easily. So we have our power tube, which is the black plastic piece, and then we have the aluminum piece on the inside, which is the valve. Very rarely do you ever have to replace the valve. The only time you'd ever have to replace a valve in this marker is if you get a constant leak down the barrel, which is a pretty rare occurrence, okay? On the inside, you have your gas line joint. The gas line joint has an O-ring inside of it that every great once in a while may need to be replaced, especially if you hear a small leak on the inside of the receiver of the gun. A leak that's obviously not coming down the barrel. So we'll go ahead, we'll set that off to the side. From there, we have our rear bolt. Okay, have our rear bolt. Our sear and our sear spring. From there, we have our drive spring and our guide pin. And we also have a damper washer on the back. Now this is a little bit different than other designs that we have. We traditionally use an O-ring for this, but on this particular marker, we use like a rubberized washer instead, okay? From there, the only other thing that we have left is our sear pin, which is a black hardened steel. You want to make sure that you get that in the proper location. Okay. And then that's it. You just have the bare bones receiver. Actually, that one part that fell out there, that's your gas line plug. Another cool feature about this gun that I forgot to mention is that you can run a stock with a tank in it, okay? And it has an internal gas line system that you can also run on this marker. That's one thing I did forget to mention. Very cool feature, by the way. So this dummy plug, it's exactly what it is. It just keeps dirt, debris, stuff like that from getting in your marker. And other than that, that's it. So from there, we'll just go back and put it back together. Maintenance, pretty simple. Just keep the parts nice and clean. Some of the most common things that we see, especially with guns that have a lot of use on them, rear bolt O-ring might need to be replaced, front bolt O-ring might need to be replaced, you know, ball latch. Those are kind of the most common items. Springs, they hardly ever wear out. You know, you may, after, you know, a lot of shots, have to replace your drive spring, but once again, it's after a lot of use. So we'll go ahead, we'll put this back together. So drive spring, rear bolt, slide that in through the back here, and it should actually kind of click into place. At least the guide pin should. And then from there, go ahead and start with your power tube and your valve system. It's a little bit different than what you would normally do. I've gotten so used to just putting the valve in first that just kind of comes natural. So now that we have that in place, we're gonna go ahead and put our front bolt on. We're gonna go ahead and attach our linkage arm. Now this is a crucial part. Like I said before, this needs to be indexed properly. If it's flipped around the other way, then your charging handle, the gun won't function correctly. So we're gonna go ahead, and you can see there's a little bit of a length difference here. Okay, so the shorter end of the linkage arm should be facing towards the rear of the marker. Okay, so we'll go ahead, we'll put that in place, just like so. From there, we can slide our trigger in underneath the gas line because that pin's not there. We'll go ahead and reinsert our trigger pin, our trigger spring, and then we'll go ahead and start reinserting our pins for the secondary trigger and also the sear pin. Sear pin, like always, it's a hardened steel, it's black in color, it needs to go all the way as far to the right. So the furthest pinhole to your right is where your sear pin will rest. Then from there you have your sear. Go ahead and drop that into place. Sear spring. Your secondary trigger, okay? Actually, it's orientated that way. So we'll go ahead and drop that. And you'll see like there's a hole on the front side of the trigger there, okay? That hole is what's gonna ride on top of that pivot pin, all right? From there, we'll go ahead and reconnect our trigger linkage. And then we'll go ahead and reinsert our gas line plug for the air through stock system. Here's another tricky part. So your charging handle, it has this spring on the front side of it. You have to kind of preload this spring as you drop it down inside the receiver, okay? And there's a part of the receiver that will actually preload that spring for you as you drop it down into place. Now, another thing that you want to be careful of is that plastic piece that I was referring to earlier on the linkage arm. You want to make sure that that plastic piece actually goes into the charging handle, okay? So we'll go ahead, we'll just kind of preload that spring and drop our charging handle in there, and that's it. It looks easy, but it might take most people a couple tries to get that in there, but that's how it goes. And you want to make sure that that spring is preloaded. If not, your charging handle is going to feel really weird. It's going to feel gritty. It's just not going to be right. So once you have that together, we'll show you the tricky part as far as how to put the receiver back onto the gun. There is a portion that I'll point out to you since we do have the receiver opened up. So your safety actually has to go through that hole. Well, you can see there's an obvious problem here. The trigger bar is actually blocking that hole, okay? So the trigger has to be pulled back slightly in order for the receiver with the safety to drop back into place. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do that. Try to show you exactly how we do that. So we're gonna go ahead and kind of preload our charging handle just a little bit and pull it back slightly. And I like to start with the rear end first. And then from there, we're gonna pull the trigger just slightly. And like I said, this is the tricky part. And sometimes you might have to run into the case where you remove that receiver and start all over again. All right, and that's that. So it wasn't too bad, but it took me twice. So go ahead and start tightening down these screws. All right. Go ahead and put our ASA and our rubberized grip back on there. Now, on the right-hand side of the grip, you can see where that ASA will, it's kind of molded around the grip. So you go ahead and get that lined up properly. You can kind of see where all that goes. Okay, from there, I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall the other side. Go ahead and flip our receiver over and put our Phillips head screw back into place. Change out bits here. Okay. Now you can kind of see I got a part left behind, right? So this nut fell out of the receiver pocket. Not a big deal. I'll go ahead and put that back in. I'm gonna have to switch back to our other bit here. So typically when that happens, I just put that receiver nut back into the pocket and just hold it with my free hand, just like that. Gonna go ahead and slide our hand guard back into place, find our screw for the hand guard, and then I'm still holding that receiver nut. You can go ahead and tighten down your screw. All right, from there, we'll go ahead and reinstall our barrel. And then we can also slide our rear sight back into place. All right. Now that we have it all reassembled, you can just do a function check, make sure the safety's working properly, charge the charging handle, pull the trigger, make sure your bolt goes forward. And then you can set it up for whichever style you want to play, whether it's hopper fed or mag fed. If you have any other questions or need some tech help, you can go to paintballsolutions.com or you can call our 1-800 number.